Hey guys, what up, what up? My name is Desiree, and welcome back to another episode of Criminally Focused. Whether you're new to my channel or you're a returning OG, I always say this, you are always welcome, and I really appreciate you clicking on this video. I truly hope you, like what you see, and I hope that you'll stick around a while. How's the weather out there by you guys? Do I got any Florida viewers? You enjoying the snow? In Colorado, it hasn't been that bad. I mean, it's been cold, but usually when it snows, it's pretty warm the next day, so it melts pretty fast. Speaking of Colorado, that's exactly where the case that we're talking about today takes place. Today we're talking about the unsolved homicides of 16-year-old Stephanie Hart Grizel and 15-year-old Nicholas Kunzelman. Both were senselessly murdered in 2000 in a Subway sandwich shop here in Littleton. And 25 years later, their case remains unsolved. So, it's not something I really advertise in most of my videos, but I consider Littleton, Colorado to be one of the places that I call home. And you know how sometimes when a crime or something serious happens in your own town, it feels a little bit more impactful or, I guess, more personal? Well, that's exactly how this story felt for me. And this case is long overdue to be solved. Even after years of an investigation, a drug bust, a wiretapping operation, and binders of information. Like I said, it's been 25 years and we're still sitting here talking about it today. Nicholas Kunzelman and Stephanie Hart Grizel were absolutely loved by their family and friends. What could have caused somebody to take the lives of two innocent teenagers? Well, that's exactly what I want to talk to you about today. I want to tell you everything that I've researched about Nick and Stephanie. We're going to talk about the murder and the aftermath and the lengthy investigation that followed. So like the usual, sit back, get comfy, grab whatever you're drinking or smoking, and let's get right into it.
So much has happened here in Littleton in the past year, People are dying all over the place. It's not supposed to happen here.
Another blow to the Columbine community. Tonight, another makeshift memorial for two students killed at a Subway sandwich shop.
I was hanging out with him last night. So like I said, now he's dead. This is crazy.
This video is for educational purposes only. Please always do your own research. Welcome to Littleton, Colorado, guys. Pretty much just your average suburban town. While I was researching this story, a few sources that I came across referred to Littleton as being a small mountain town. And honestly, that couldn't be farther from the truth. I mean, sure, we have the mountains and we are a town, but we're literally located about 20 miles or so from Denver, and we currently have a population of over 45,000 people. So I'd hardly call Littleton small. In 2024, it was ranked by USA Today as one of the best cities in Colorado, which kind of had me wondering what I've been missing all these years. Just kidding. With the beautiful views of the mountains, lots of open spaces and trails to hike, Littleton really does have a special charm to it. But it's a charm that honestly has taken some time to resurface. And I'm not really sure if after the tragedies that we're going to talk about today happen, that charm that Littleton once had will ever fully return. On April 20th, 1999, Littleton became known worldwide when 12 students and one teacher lost their lives after two incredibly emotionally disturbed students, or monsters, walked into Columbine High School with weapons and did the unthinkable. Growing up in Littleton during this time, I can tell you firsthand that the energy shifted dramatically after this. Remember, this was back in the 90s. Shootings didn't happen as often, especially not at a school. Personally, I didn't go to Columbine. I was at a neighboring school, not yet in high school, but I know that even for me, even walking around this town after never really felt the same again. I just can't imagine how the students at Columbine felt going forward. 16-year-old Stephanie Hart-Gersel and 15-year-old Nicholas Kunzelman were sophomores and among the students who had made it out of the school safely that day. However, just months later would tragically be murdered while inside a Subway sandwich shop after hours. But before we get into the details of that, I want to tell you more about who these two teenagers' beautiful souls were, because I really feel like the world lost something special. I know this sounds corny, but I really feel like the world lost something special when they lost them. Stephanie Lynn Hart-Gersel was born in Colorado on October 28th, 1983. And just a side note, the Colorado Bureau of Investigations, or the CBI, they list her last name only as Hart. However, her gravestone and other media sources that I've seen say Hart-Gersel, so you might find it both ways out there, but for this video, I'm just going to say Hart-Gersel. From what I've read, Stephanie sounds like she was born to be an artist. I guess she enjoyed painting and making jewelry, music, and poetry. One of her favorite musical artists was Pink Floyd, and her friends described her as having an old soul. Her mom, Kelly, described her as having a pure heart and called her a flower child. Besides being incredibly artistic, Stephanie also liked to learn, and I guess she excelled at school. She also enjoyed sports, especially swimming. I guess her fun, kind-hearted energy attracted a lot of people, and she had a lot of friends. One of these friends was Nick Kunzelman. Nicholas Ray Kunzelman was born on March 15th, 1984, also here in Colorado. Nick loved music and played the guitar. I've read that he also enjoyed playing disc golf, and I guess he was really good at it. So good, in fact, that he played in the tournaments for the Colorado Professional Disc Golf Association's Junior League. Those who knew Nick described him as a good man who loved his family and would do anything for them. Someone he would also come to love, though, was Stephanie. So much so that his family said she was basically his entire world. The two's relationship had begun, just as a friendship while they were in middle school. However, after time went by and they grew up a little bit, families said that their relationship eventually bloomed into something more and that they became a really happy couple. Friends said the two really bonded over their love for music and love for art. Nick's stepmom, Teresa, she said that their relationship was precious and that it was really strange for two teenagers to be in love like that. I guess it was just kind of one of those once-in-a-lifetime kind of loves. Something that I think if we're all honest with ourselves, we all kind of dream of having eventually. Shortly before the shooting, Nick began working part-time at a Subway sandwich shop located at 6768 West Coal Mine Avenue in Littleton, Colorado. So not too long after getting hired, Nick's managers felt that he was a trustworthy employee and started scheduling him to work the closing shift. I believe they said it was about a month or so after he started working there, so pretty fast. Friends were often seen during a shift visiting or hanging out in the lobby. And we'll talk more about this later, but apparently this was totally common for many of the employees to do while they were working. Many times during the employees' shifts, friends were just seen either hanging out in the lobby or just, smoking outside. I can kind of remember that from when I was in high school. Friends always come by and say, "What up?" Go outside with you on breaks, and I imagine that's kind of what was going on. On Sunday, February 13th, 2000, Nick was again scheduled to work the closing shift, which meant working alone until 10 p.m. During Nick's shift, Stephanie was at home, and she was just working on algebra homework and kind of hanging out with her mom. I guess Stephanie's mom said the last time she saw her, she was wearing her pajamas and working on homework in bed. The two said goodnight, and Kelly told her that she loved her, and she went to bed, expecting that Stephanie would do the same shortly after. That night at Subway, Nick's shift had been pretty uneventful, and I guess business had been slow. Between 8 and around 9:55, a couple of his friends were seen inside the store just hanging out, sitting at a table in the lobby. According to the reports that I read, these friends left shortly before Nick closed the store at 10 p.m. Meanwhile, Stephanie had snuck out of her house and drove to Subway to pick Nick up from work. And we don't know the exact time she got there. We just kind of have to assume that it was sometime after the friends left at 10 p.m. And I totally get it. You're probably asking, where were the cameras? Well, unfortunately, the security cameras that were installed inside the store weren't actually turned on that night, meaning they weren't recording anything. So after Nick's friends left, the next couple of hours really remain a mystery. The next morning, on February 14th, 2000, at 12:45 a.m., another employee of Subway happened to be driving by and noticed that the lights were still on inside the store. And since Subway had closed hours earlier, this kind of caught her attention. And as she passed, she noticed a man was leaving through the back of the store. So, wanting to find out what was going on, she parked her car and headed inside the store. When she was inside, tragically, she discovered the bodies of Nick and Stephanie behind the front counter, and both had been shot. At 12:47 a.m., she called 911, and the Jefferson County Police Department responded to the scene. Sadly, when they arrived, there wasn't anything they could do to help the two, and Nick and Stephanie were pronounced dead. Later, their families would be notified of what happened, and honestly, the way that Kelly, Stephanie's mom, found out about her daughter's death makes this so much more heartbreaking to me. That morning, Kelly got out of bed and began her morning like she probably had many times before. This morning, however, she did notice that Stephanie's car wasn't parked outside like it normally was. Although that was unusual, she kind of just set that aside in her mind and continued on with her morning. Not putting too much thought into it, probably just figured she had left early that day. Now, I'm not sure if she started her coffee or made some tea, but at some point she turned on the morning news. And as she was listening, the news reporter began talking about a shooting that had happened at a Subway in Littleton the night before. Kelly said that as the reporter continued to talk, the cameraman panned to the parking lot outside a Subway. This is when she noticed that Stephanie's car was parked there. She obviously didn't know why and said that she had a really uneasy feeling about it. But I'm assuming she didn't have much time to really think about it before someone started knocking at her door. Apparently, the police had showed up to talk, and the news cameras were following right behind them. As the police told Kelly the horrible news about Stephanie, life as she knew it would cease to exist. Stephanie was her only child, and she was her absolute world. She would later say in an interview that it was just awful. I can remember somebody saying, "Is this the mother?" And you just can't imagine. You're hoping that there's somebody standing behind you, or that they're not looking at you, or that you're dreaming. You guys know I'm a mom, and that absolutely rips my heart out of my chest. It's literally your worst nightmare as a parent, and then to have the media standing there ready to capture it all and to invade your life at literally probably the most challenging time you'll ever face. No, that's horrible. And I just can't imagine.
Tonight, Littleton residents are coping with yet another shooting tragedy. The bodies of Columbine students 16-year-old Nicholas Kunzelman and 15-year-old Stephanie Hart were found early this morning in a Subway restaurant within sight of the high school.
We have team coverage tonight with 7 News reporters Hendrik Sabrandi and Sean McLaughlin. And Hendrik, let's start with you.
Well, Ann and Bertha, a couple of new items to report tonight. First of all, it is not clear how much help the Subway store's surveillance camera will be in this investigation. There's a question tonight as to whether there was actually a tape working properly inside that camera. Secondly, investigators are waiting on store officials to do an audit of the cash drawer in the shop. That will help determine whether, in fact, this was a robbery that went horribly wrong.
In the days following, police would announce that Stephanie and Nick's death had been determined to be a homicide and that they had died from gunshot wounds. They said that the motive was unknown and that the security footage from that night was unavailable. They did give a brief description of the man that the employees saw leaving through the back door of the Subway. At this time, all they said was that he was a young white male in his late teens and early 20s. They said that he was wearing a red jacket and flared pants. I found that description to be a little weird. I don't really remember flared pants being that popular in the 90s, especially not for guys. But I was pretty young in the 90s, so, maybe I am remembering this wrong. But This point kind of stood out to me. You'll have to let me know if I'm wrong in the comments section below, but I really just don't remember guys wearing flared pants that often. I remember Jinkos being popular back then, but like I said, I was young, so maybe I'm totally wrong here. As the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office continued their investigation, they would end up speaking with Nick and Stephanie's friends and family, trying to figure out what had happened and who could have possibly had a motive to kill them. Detectives wanted to know if Nick or Stephanie had had any issues with anyone, and nobody could think of any reason why anyone would have been angry enough or had any reason at all to hurt them. Officers then spoke with the friends who had been inside the subway that night hanging out with Nick, while he finished up his shift. The friends told detectives that as far as they knew, nothing unusual took place while they were at Subway that night, although they did mention that when they left, there had still been one customer inside the store. When the media spoke with Nick's friends, one of them, his name was Nathan, said it really wasn't strange that the security cameras had been off during the day of the shooting. He recalled that when he worked there, the security cameras were really only on every few months. On February 19, 2000, a funeral was held and more than 2,000 people attended. According to the Associated Press, friends there remembered the couple as refugees of the 60s, for whom peace and love was the goal, even though they were both born in the 80s. After the funeral, Nick and Stephanie were both buried together at the Mount Lindo Cemetery in Morrison, Colorado, because that's exactly what their families said that they would have wanted. And to me, that's just so special.
He'd always come in and he'd say hi and stuff. He was really nice and friendly. I just don't understand how this could happen.
Laid back, nice, just doing his job. I was hanging out with him last night. Just like I said, now he's dead. This is crazy.
Crazy and incomprehensible to the mother of a Columbine student who died a mile away nearly a year ago.
I mean, it's just something you can't even imagine of what it's like to actually lose your child, and I know right where they're at. And these students, I mean, it's just one thing after another.
After the murders, Subway offered a $10,000 reward for information that would lead to an arrest, and said that they just wanted to offer it to help police find out who had committed the murders. They believed that somebody knew something in the community, and they were hoping that by offering this reward, it would kind of entice them to come forward. And since the police wouldn't comment on what the motive was, people, of course, started to speculate. Some thought that the murders had been due to a robbery gone wrong, while others thought that they had to do with drugs. According to a local pastor, after the shooting, multiple students had told him that the subway was a known spot to meet up with drug dealers and that the murders had definitely been related somehow. And remember that friend Nathan, who we talked about earlier, he actually disputed that claim and came forward and talked to Salon.com and said that he really didn't think that the shooting had been related to drugs. He explained that possibly, besides smoking weed out back, maybe, he didn't know of any drugs being dealt out of the store. Nathan also said that he didn't think that the murders had anything to do with the robbery. And you know how I had said that he had worked at Subway previously and that's how he knew that information about the security cameras? Well, he remembered that during their shifts, they were supposed to deposit money from the cash register into the safe on like an hourly basis, meaning the register wouldn't have had much money in it. And besides, regardless of how much money they kept in the register during their shift, this would have been after 10 p.m., so the money should have been locked in a safe and the employees didn't have access to it. By February 23rd, the police had conducted 200 interviews and received over 150 tips. Out of these interviews, they met with the two witnesses who had seen a man in the area at the time of the shooting. Two described the man as a white male who stood around 5'7" to 5'8" inches tall and weighed between 150 and 170 pounds. They said that the man they saw had blondish colored hair and was clean shaven. According to both witnesses, he was wearing blue jeans, tennis shoes, a black baseball hat, and a black coat with either a red lining in it or he was wearing a red shirt inside the jacket. After they conducted the interviews, the detectives brought in sketch artists and They ended up releasing two pretty different variations of what the man could have looked like. And keep in mind, witness descriptions can always vary. If the employee was driving up to the store, she might not have gotten as good of a view compared to someone who might have walked by this man. Regardless of the differences, though, the police released the sketches to the public and the description in hopes that maybe somebody would recognize him. Police also said that at this point in their investigation, they didn't believe the murders were random and, that somebody just walking through the neighborhood had killed them. They believed that whoever had committed the murders probably knew Nick and Stephanie, and they didn't really elaborate on if they thought that it had been a friend, an enemy, or maybe even a fellow employee or a drug deal gone wrong. In July 2000, the owners of Subway were fined $18,625 for allowing Nick to work past 7 p.m. since it had been a school night. Since he was under the age of 18, working until 10 p.m. violated the laws. The district director for the U.S. Department of Labor, Wage, and Hour Division actually determined that if the owners of Subway hadn't violated this law, then Nick would still be alive. This wouldn't be the only legal battle that the owners of Subway would face. February 2001, Stephanie's mom, Kelly, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the owner of Subway. And in this lawsuit, she claimed that Subway had been a home to a drug ring and that this is what led to her daughter's murder. When I looked online to try to find the actual court documents, I wasn't able to find anything more than a brief synopsis that just basically explained what had happened and who the plaintiff and the defendant were. So for this part of the video, we're going to go off of what I read in the Denver Post and the Associated Press. According to the Associated Press, Kelly said that the back door to the restaurant had been used for drug deals and went on to say that the store intentionally had turned off the security cameras inside and the owners didn't mind because this was to avoid, drug deals from being caught on camera. Kelly's attorneys also said that they believed that Nick smoked weed and thought that the killer probably smoked weed too. It was in their opinion that Nick had potentially opened the back door to the Subway shop to let this killer in for like a drug deal, and this is what led to their murders. Unfortunately, the judge would end up siding with the owners of Subway and the case would be dismissed. They basically said that since Stephanie hadn't been an employee and that the shooting had occurred after hours, that Subway wasn't liable for her murder. However, like a badass, Kelly would end up continuing her fight and taking the case to the Court of Appeals. This time around, her lawyer said that the owners had a duty to protect its employees and its customers from the foreseeable consequence of criminal acts by taking reasonable security precautions, which included the hiring of an adult employee to operate and supervise a premises on school nights, including closing down the restaurant. However, this time around, the Court of Appeals also sided with Hartman Enterprises and said that Kelly's legal team failed to show the evidence that Stephanie had been a customer and at this location to conduct business. Since the store was closed at the time of the shooting, Stephanie hadn't been there to purchase anything, so she wasn't a customer. And so, therefore, the owners had no obligation, to protect her. And sadly, this case was ultimately dismissed as well. In February 2002, the police again spoke publicly about the case. They said that the investigators had followed leads as far as Florida and North Carolina and conducted over 20 polygraph tests as a result. And then the police revealed kind of a big piece of information. More information about what they thought the motive was. According to investigators, they didn't think that the motive was robbery, and now we're looking at the possible connection that the murders had been connected to drugs. The detectives explained that during their investigation, they had went and interviewed people who had been arrested for drugs in this area, kind of trying to determine if there had actually been a drug ring operating out of the Subway. They even conducted a wiretapping operation where police listened to over 3,000 phone calls. And this actually led to the cops arresting 35 people on unrelated drug charges stemming from distributing drugs to minors. And then in 2017, investigators spoke out again to the public. They said that although they had been quiet, they were still working on their investigation every day. And over the years, they had actually filled up over 40 binders of information. These binders included details from hundreds of interviews and information on over 150 items of evidence. They said that the evidence that they had collected over the years included things such as DNA, fingerprints, and other items, and they had actually had them tested by labs all over the country. But so far, the suspect remains at large. When questioned about their secrecy and lack of information that they have given to the public, the investigators said, they do this on purpose. The investigators started talking about what they call guilt knowledge, or only information that the killer would know. And apparently, over the years, people had actually come forward and confessed to the murders. However, because of guilt knowledge, or information that the police didn't release to the public, they were able to determine that these confessions were false.
This is the cold case file room inside the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. Inside these binders, part of the story of what happened to Stephanie Hart Grizel and Nick Kunzelman. Now investigators hoping tips will help them finally close the case.
Just all right together.
Peace lives on top of a mountain.
We always make a point of getting together on that day and paying our respects.
Where the horrors of Valentine's Day 17 years ago melt away.
We're police and cameras, and it was just awful.
Tonight, another makeshift memorial.
I can remember somebody saying, "Is this the mother?" And you can't imagine. You're hoping there's somebody standing behind you.
Stephanie's mom, Kelly, found out just like the rest of the community on the news. But despite all the attention,
We just haven't gotten the tips.
leads unusually quiet.
It was like no one had seen anything, no one had heard anything.
There is a massive amount of paperwork, the largest of any active case in Jefferson County, nearly 40 binders worth.
20 years after the murder in 2020, a detective named Elias Alberti spoke with Fox 31 Denver and said they still receive tips on the case and they haven't given up. However, a lot of the tips that they've received are, theories, people's personal opinions, or rumors that people have heard. He said they are very grateful for, any tip that they receive, and they do research each and every single one of them. What they really need is someone to come forward with firsthand knowledge of what specifically took place, what led up to the murders, during the murders, or even after. When he was questioned by the interviewer, he said that he wasn't sure if more than one person was involved in the shooting. However, what he does know is that there is someone out here in the community and they know something that could solve these murders. He's hoping that, as the years have passed, these people that might know the details of the crime and, haven't come forward yet are maybe feeling guilty, or maybe that a relationship that they had back 25 years ago, that made them stay quiet and that they felt loyal to, maybe the loyalty might be different now. And maybe they'd be willing to come forward. In May of 2021, Metro Denver Crime Stoppers temporarily increased the reward from $12,000 to $100,000 for any information that would lead to an arrest in the case.
Even 20 years later, the murders of teen sweethearts Nick Kunzelman and Stephanie Hart Grizel are on the minds of people in Littleton.
Whether it's asking when we're going to post about it, asking for updates, or people simply reaching out to us to say that they remember this case and they want it to be solved.
We still get tips. We recently got a tip within the last couple of weeks.
Jefferson County homicide investigator Elias Alberti says some callers report rumors, theories, or personal opinions. And while he checks them all out, he is still waiting for that key piece to the puzzle.
Sadly, the reward was only valid until August 14, 2021, and with no arrest made, it dropped back down to $12,000. And then last year, the reward was increased to $60,000. And that's where I believe it still stands today. And that brings us to today and us sitting here talking about how there's been no justice 25 years later. So theories. What do they think? Drug theory or a robbery? And what do I think? I tend to think that this had something to do with drugs. And, I know that a lot of times that rumors can be totally baseless. However, I think when multiple people come forward suggesting that there was a drug connection, and then with no money being gone from the register, those rumors seem pretty credible to me. Unless, of course, the killer was going to rob the store way after hours and, came in, was startled by Nick and Stephanie. And when they realized that Nick wasn't able to get into the safe, they freaked out and killed the two. That theory just doesn't seem as plausible to me. Speaking of random theories, people over the years have come up with some pretty wild ideas. So let's talk about those. One of the ideas that people have speculated on was that the shooting might have been connected to the Columbine High School shooting. And respectfully, I'm going to disagree with that. I think people just thought that it was connected because the investigators would, after the shooting, go on to interview different Columbine High School students. And that was just because Nick and Stephanie went to Columbine and they were friends with them. So I don't think this theory holds any weight. And then I also read in a couple articles and listened to a couple podcasts that seem to try to place suspicion on Nick's friend Nathan. And this is the one that I mentioned, TalkToSalon.com, and that the police would, later investigate because he had been there that night. I think that people thought that the fact that he knew that there wasn't security cameras and that he spoke to the media such as Salon.com was a little suspicious. But, while I was researching, I saw nothing more than a friend who was grieving and just speaking out to help. So I think we have to be very careful with our theories, and I'm just going to put that one to the side. I'm going to have to back Kelly up and say that I think these murders had something to do with drug dealing, and I think, in my opinion, that the owners should have been held liable. It's just really crappy that this had to have taken place after hours. I think if the store would have been open and this would have happened, then things would have been a lot different. All right, guys, what do you think? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. And always keep in mind that Nick and Stephanie's friends or family, they might read your comments, so just keep them kind and respectful. Please. And to all of my Littleton friends, I know you're watching, so please share this video on your social media platforms. 25 years is way too long for a murder to go unsolved. And to everyone outside of Littleton, please share this video as well. Share the video, like and comment on it. These are ways that we can bump it up in the YouTube algorithm and get more attention on this case by getting it in front of more people's eyes. You just never know. By sharing this video, the right person, no matter where they're currently living, might hear it and decide to come forward. You could be a part of justice, and that's what I want you to focus on from today's video. If you know anything at all, please reach out to Denver Metro Crime Stoppers at 720-913-7867. You can remain totally anonymous. I'm also going to leave a link below in the description box of an online tip form that you can use and submit if that's easier for you. All right, guys. Until next time, stay warm, stay safe, and stay focused. Bye.